Good morning, happy Tuesday everybody. I am going to make the video that I told you all about where I was going to show some of my favorite reborning supplies. And it's a little dark because the first thing I'm going to tell you that's very important is lighting, and you're going to see why. So this is my workspace with just my overhead lighting. Now my overhead light bulbs are in this particular area are fluorescent bulbs, but I do have daylight bulbs in there. But all my other lighting that I'm going to turn on right now are OT lights. So you're going to see what the difference with all my OT lights are in my work area. So that's with all my lights on. So number one important thing in my opinion is lighting. Lighting makes a huge, huge difference. These again are all OT lights. This particular one here actually has a built-in magnifying glass, so I can pull it down if I need to look through that if I'm working on really small, fine details. So lighting is huge, ladies. Very important. I do have a tablecloth down. This tablecloth I have used for all of my reborning now, and this is my 4th year. So I just keep this tablecloth on, and then I put one of these down. People use puppy pads, or I actually was using, I believe Depends makes like a bed pad, and they're actually my favorite because they're soft and thick and they're on both sides. So not only can you spin it and use it for the second baby, but you can also flip it. But I actually got these off of one of the sales sites when I lived in Texas, off Facebook. I don't know if you guys belong to your local like garage sale sites. Anyway, a woman's mother had passed away and she was selling these bed pads, so I bought several packages from her. So I just lay that out on my workspace, and that's what I work on. It's great for, you know, if you need to wipe your brush off, or, you know, if you get a little too much on your pouncing sponge, you can, you know, pounce it on there, whatever. So very important to have something absorbent on your workspace. So I use that. And then before I paint any kit, I wash it with Dawn. Just the regular, not the super concentrated. This is the non-concentrated, plain, regular blue Dawn. This is still my original bottle, and I'm on my 50-something baby, 55, 56. So, and I have used this for other things too. But this is just plain non-concentrated. And then once the baby is fully dry, I typically will wash the baby the night before. I do take like a cheesecloth and kind of pat them dry a little bit, because I found if I didn't, some of them had watermarks, like a water droplet would dry and leave a watermark. So I do pat them dry and let them sit overnight on a drying rack. And then I do then wipe them right before I paint with rubbing alcohol. Alcohol dries very, very quickly. That just let me remember I need to back up a bit and get one of my drying racks. I have babies on them because I did not lay out a drying rack. But yes, I wipe them then down with alcohol, and then they just air dry while I begin mixing up or getting my first step of the phase ready. And then here's a drying rack. I actually have 2 different ones. I'm going to show you this one. This one was given to me in my reborning class, and this is my favorite because all the dowels come out, which is really handy, so you can like keep a limb on there and not touch it. And I put the head here and then the 4 limbs. But it's very important to know I use Genesis heat set paint. So when you take your baby out of the oven, like, you don't want to put the head on here or you're going to get like a pop-up in the head. So that's important to note. You don't want to put the hot vinyl onto the dowels. But this is my favorite rack. The other one I have is just a wooden plate rack that I think I got at the Container Store. And I actually take I have a baking sheet, which right now has all my bowls of paint I'm utilizing for the babies I'm working on, that I lay a white muslin blanket, which is right here on the back of my chair. I lay a white muslin blanket on that, and then I carry that out to the garage with both my drying racks on, because I tend to paint 2 babies at a time. Sometimes I'll do 1, but 2 is my max, pretty much. And I can carry the baking tray out to the garage with both racks on, and then once I put one baby's parts in the oven, I bring the drying rack inside, and then as the parts come out, I just lay them on the white muslin blanket to air dry. So that's that. And then Genesis Heat Set paints require mineral spirits. They're oil-based paints. I use two different ones. I use Gamblin' Gamsol and Bob Ross. Those should kind of be reversed. I use Bob Ross for like my washes and mottling, and I use Gamblin for creases and details because Gamblin has a longer flash time, meaning it takes it longer to air dry. Even though they are heat set paints, they do need to be air dry before you put them in your oven. Like, you don't want them to be wet and bake them. So this has a longer flash time, which gives me more time as I'm working in the details to, you know, smooth them out or make corrections. So that's why I use these two. I have not tried Mona Lisa. I was told that Mona Lisa creates chalky ethnic babies, and so that's why I've always stuck with these. I have found my Hobby Lobby now does carry Bob Ross, because I actually ordered this one off the internet because I couldn't find it here, but I did find it the other day, so I'm happy about that. And I believe they carry Gamblin' Gamsol. So those are the two that I use. And my favorite bowls are these. These are just little, I picked them up at a thrift store, and some I got at a garage sale, actually. I look for bowls that have this kind of ridging, so that when I put my mineral spirits in my paint, I can like swirl on there, and I find that little ridging gives me a really smooth mixture, so I end up with no little lumps in my paint or anything. So I like those. I've tried other things. I still have them. I have like a big palette that's flat and it's glass. You need to use glass with Genesis. And I did like that, but I just find this makes a better mixing surface for me. And then I do use a glass candle plate. That's what I put my mats on here, so that I can make sure they're nice and smooth before I apply them. Although when I use, well, even dewy finish, I do use it quote unquote direct from the jar, but I do take it out and kind of put it on here first. So those are my favorite dishes that I use. Brushes are very individual, I have found. I belong to several art groups, and people will rave about a brush, and I'll order it, and then I don't like it. So brushes are going to be hit or miss. You're just going to have to order and see what you like. Mop brushes are very important for pouncing. You're going to want smaller brushes for mixing, thin brushes for detailing, flat brushes for applying your washes. Excuse me. You can get brushes from Reborn supply places. You can get them at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, although Michael's has a very small, well, Michael's is good. Joann's doesn't have a very good selection. But Hobby Lobby and Michael's and other art stores, or you can order them off the internet. So brushes, I really can't specify any particular one for anybody, because as I have found, they are as unique as each person, what people like. So just find brushes that you like the feel of the handles, you like the way they work. I do like Teflon bristles because they don't shed. Not all of these are Teflon, but that is something to point out. I do have two of these little things. They're little nesting. I find if I make up a little, like a lip mixture that I like, I can save it in these, and they'll be fine. I have the other one over there is quite full, but I got that off of Amazon. I wear gloves while I paint, so just, I buy a box of disposable gloves, and I go through a lot of gloves. As you can see, the fingertips on this one are, I gotta sit down, ladies, are a little messy. So I go through a lot of gloves. Sponges, I use a couple different kinds of cosmetic wedges. These are the little thin ones. And they're a little denser for pouncing, and then these bigger, squishier, soft ones. They're a little more absorbent, so they do take off more than these do. So again, it's about preference. These are my mottling sponges. I have used these on every single baby I've created. These are 3.5 years old. I know some people make new sponges each time. I do have more over there with different colors. These are just the ones I happen to have out that I was using, but I have used these on all my babies. You just take a tweezer and pluck out your pattern that you want, and that's your mottling sponges. I also like these little cotton pads. The brand I think is Swisper or something. And I prefer this brand because they're like a fuzzy cotton on one side, but the other side is smooth. This tends to be the side I use because I don't want the cotton fuzz getting on the baby. But these are really good. Let's say you start mottling and your color might be too dark or something. You can put a little bit of your mineral spirits and just wipe it off. And as long as you've baked, well, you know, wherever you're at in the baby, if you're several layers in, if you've baked up to that point and you wipe off, everything that's been baked will remain on the baby. So these are kind of nice for, whoops. And I also use the two different kind of Q-tip. These are Q-tip brand. They're precision ones or something. They're pointy on both ends. I like having that little point. These are really good for getting in places. And then this one I buy, I think this is the Swisper brand. It's pointy on one end, but it's flat on the other. Again, they just come in handy. I'm trying to think of an example, but I just find I grab these and use them for things. So those I always have on hand as well. Toothpicks are another handy thing to have. You never know when you're going to need a toothpick. I also have shown you before, this is what I use. These silicone spoons are what I use for putting the magnet inside the baby's head. And then these two brushes, I call them disposable, but technically I do dispose of these quite often because I find I use these. I go down in the glue I put on the magnet and put it on here, and by the time I get everything done, you know, the bristles are like clumped and glued together, and I'm not putting that down my drain. So these I do wash. These are what I spread my glue inside of the head after I've rooted. And I wash those and use them over and over. And then I have this little brush cleaning jar. It has you can see the solvent is a little dirty down there, but it has let me see if I can open it with one hand. Let me set y'all down here for a second. It has a metal coil inside. So if your brush is small enough, you can dip it down into that center, and then if it's not, I kind of push it with the brush over and dip down in the side. And then you rub your brush back and forth on these coils until all the color comes off. And that's how I clean my brushes. I use Winsor and Newton brush cleaner and restorer. That's what's in here. This is also what I use to strip a baby when it needs to be stripped. Actually, I do have a large bottle up in my cabinet. I bought several of these. I can only get this here at Joann's, and this is the only size they sell. And so I had been, every time I was nearby, because it's it's in the same street as my grocery store, I would run in and buy a bottle with one of their coupons, because I think this bottle here is like $7.99 or something. So I would use a coupon. So I have a few of those left, and then I ordered some off the internet because I was used to my large, I don't, it's like 32 ounces or something bottle. But I don't use it from the bottle. This has see that tiny bit in there? Sometimes if I need to, I will use like a pointy Q-tip, and I don't want to waste that little tiny bit. But I have my solvents are actually in squirt bottles. You see they're labeled Bob Ross brush cleaner and Gamsol there. I do have some Miracle Blend air dry paints that I had ordered for painting hair. I've never tried them yet. I've had them for ages, but I just use Genesis. Again, that's one of the things, you know, you research things and you think, oh, I'll try that, and you end up ordering things you're never going to use. So I do try to be careful not to do that. I don't have a ton of extraneous items, but that happens to be one of mine, is that Miracle Blend air dry paint up there. And so that's pretty much my favorite supplies. And then towels. I typically always have a towel in my lap. And also, sorry, I'm listening to the phone. My phone is ringing. Let's see who it is. And what are those called? Cheesecloth. They just come in handy, like when you're stripping, or you get something on your, like sometimes I'll take my gloves off and do something and I want to wipe my hands. I just like having towels on hand to do things. So those are my favorite supplies. And then Okay, I was sorry, just listening to who was talking on my machine. So anyway, again, lighting is very important. That particular light holds things. I keep my favorite brushes in there. I have other brushes over there. And then I keep extra brushes in drawers and stuff. I have tons and tons of brushes. That is something I tend to buy a lot of, is brushes. So those are my favorite supplies. And then, of course, for filling the babies, I use fine glass beads. And then this is a mixture of baby fat and fine glass beads for in the body. I use a cup and a funnel. I use the cup. I will stretch the pantyhose over the cup and scoop the stuff in. And I use the funnel to fill the limbs. I find it makes it easier. So I'm going to actually take y'all outside, and that's where we're going to end. I'm just looking around to see if there's anything else I need to share. I think that's it. We're going to end outside because I do want to show y'all my oven, and I bake outside. It is a choice I've made because I don't want to breathe the fumes, and I don't know how much truth there is to it causing health issues, and I don't really want to find out. So every time I bake, I have to go outside. My fairy garden is not there. Oh, look, there's Bun Bun. You see him hopping over there? Hi, Bun Bun. So I have my fairy garden here in the garage, and it's actually doing quite well. There she is. Anyway, so here's my oven. And what I wanted to point out was a couple things. I used the New Wave oven, and this is the one that has this like anti-shatter. I used to have the white one, and that's what broke on mine. It cracked, and so I replaced it. I have two of these. One is actually downstairs, but I need to replace this because so much for anti-crack. It did crack in our move, and I do need to reorder just the dome part. But what I wanted to point out is a couple things. One, you really want the extender ring because the heating element is up there. So you want to create distance. You don't want the heat super close to your vinyl. You also want to lay, I use cheesecloth. Some people use a white towel, but you want to lay something in here soft with no color. And this is what I set my pieces on when I'm baking them for all the different layers. However, I'm trying to think if that's all I wanted to say about this. I do 265 for 10 minutes, and then I go in my house and I set my kitchen timer for 9 minutes because I'm usually down in the basement doing other things. So when it rings, by the time I get upstairs and out here, typically as I'm walking into the garage, this turns off. So it's perfect timing for me. But then what I do want to point out are a couple things. Under here, I know when Yvonne showed her Rose Doll show, when she walked around, there was a table that was selling these wooden discs full of holes, and then they had doweling in them, and it was, you know, for baking your babies. And I actually, I don't remember if I asked Yvonne or if I just saw the name in her video, but anyway, I contacted the person, and to this day I've never heard back from them. So I asked my husband to make me one, bless him, and he did. So he made me this insert, and I leave it in here under my towel. But what I found, ladies, is while it's a great idea in theory, because your limbs are not laying down, they're getting heat circulating all the way around, they're closer to the heating element. So I was finding the hands and like the bottoms of the feet were getting really shiny. And so I've done a couple things. Number one is I only utilize this system of baking for my final sealers. Not the painting, but for the sealant at the end, the skin texture. Because that part goes in here wet. And that's why I use cheesecloth over a towel, because if you have a towel in here, the fibers will maybe stick on, but will also create a little towel texture look to them. So I do this for that, but I also, since I have two ovens, I add a second extender ring like that, so that the heating element is even higher, which is about the same, I found, as when there's one extender ring and the limbs laying flat, if that makes sense. So now they're at the same height they always are in this position, but I kind of spaced them a little differently. It have to be different for each baby because, you know, positioning of limbs, and I set the head in the middle. So that's what I do for that. The other thing I wanted to point out, when this is in its normal positioning and the limbs are laying on the fabric, let me lay my cheesecloth back in here. So I set my head in the center and the limbs go around, and sometimes I use the one off of my drying rack, or if that drying rack is gone in the house, this is how I take my limbs out. I stick this in the hole and I lift it and put it over on my baking rack. That way I don't burn my fingers. So anyway, that is most of them. I think that's everything. All my favorite things. Oops, there's the lawnmower. I didn't show you the paint because obviously you know what Genesis paint looks like. But anyway, or you can look it up online. So, all right, ladies, thank you for stopping by and seeing some of my favorite reborning supplies. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.